Hello, and you're very welcome along to another edition of the JMAC Podcast. I'm John Mohan. Of course, this podcast is kindly brought to you by orgarech.com. Use my promo code JMAC Podcast to get 15% off on the website. And tonight, I'm joined by All Ireland club winner Kevin McCarthy to talk about last weekend's championship action and, of course, this weekend's championship action. So it's hard to believe we're at this juncture already, Kevin, but we may as well get used to it. How are you?
I'm great, John. The weather's great here in Edinburgh at the minute, so I'm sure it's the same back home. And Bruce Springsteen, Girls in Their Summer Clothes, has been blasting in the ears all day. So, it's that time of year. The sun's out, the grass is cut, and it's championship football time. And it was a great start yesterday to all the champs. A great weekend of football, actually. The games weren't great as such, but it's great to get championship football back on. And, the road to Croke is firmly on. And I'm sure we're going to get into the meat and bones, especially of the Ulster Championship, the main game yesterday, which I was privileged to watch. And, I have one or two comments maybe to make on the new rules, just seeing them in terms of in the cut and thrust of championship and maybe how we can tweak them a small bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a good weekend? No doubt you enjoyed the sun.
I did, yeah, John, I did. So, lucky enough over here, out by the beach. So it's great that way. Good out swimming the sea, and a bit of fitness done over the weekend. So yeah, great, and then able to sit down and watch the games Saturday, Sunday. So bit of the hurling as well yesterday, which is great. But as I say, we're getting into the championship end of things, and over the next 2-3 months, it's going to be great to see how things develop. And I think we're in for a very wide open championship this year. We've gone through 5, 6, 7 years of Dublin rule. We've then had the surprise packet that were Tyrone. Then we've had the surprise packet that was, I suppose, Armagh. Kerry's been in and about for the last 10 years, really underachieving, in my opinion, over that period of time, getting inside Croke Park, not delivering time after time, which is a big frustration. Obviously the rise of Galway and Mayo's always been thereabouts. So, look, Donegal as well, when McGuinness back in last year, and we'll get to talk about them in particular in a lot more detail. So, look, I think it's a wide open championship. Lots of different people will have various different opinions who can win it this year. It's not as clear cut as I say as maybe over the past decade. So, look, that makes for an interesting championship, and I suppose the next 3-4 months is going to be pretty exciting for all GA enthusiasts.
Yeah, it's very open this year. It has to be said, absolutely. Well, good stuff, Kevin. That is what it's all about. I suppose we will crack in to the action that took place over the weekend. Kevin, I suppose there's only really one place to start over the weekend. It was in the Ulster Senior Football Championship preliminary round. It was Donegal against Derry. It was Donegal 125, Derry 115 in Ballybuffet in the sunshine yesterday. Yeah, a very good win for Donegal here, it had to be said. I think when they really upped the ante, they really went at Derry and had a really good performance. And I think Derry would be very disappointed with that second half performance. I think Brendan Rodgers really was the only man that stood up at times in that second half. But I think former Tyrone selector Gavin Devlin was on Willie Parkin's podcast earlier today, and he was basically saying there's only one man for that job, and it's Rory Gallagher. The players just don't look really kind of buying into what that Paddy Tally project, and I think at times like Derry still have a very, very good team, that'd be said, and there's still a lot of good footballers, but a penny for Rory Gallagher's thoughts at times watching that Derry performance. Was to get your thoughts on that in a few minutes, but this game yesterday, Kevin, overall thoughts?
Yeah, John, I've nailed my colours to the mast at the start of the year in the WhatsApp group. So even before a ball was kicked in the league, I think that Donegal, for me, were the one team, especially with the new rules coming along, with a very wise man like McGuinness. For me, they are the slight favourites for the All-Ireland this year before everybody else. I think it'll be interesting to get the other pundits' feedback on this and probably viewers' feedback on this. I just think Donegal have all of the assets, with which the new rules, you need in the new rules. They have everything from start to finish. We've seen flashes of that yesterday. I mean, they have in Sean Patton a guy who can give them primary possession, whether it be a very accurate short kickouts or the big long bombs, straight down the pitch, win primary kickouts. They have unbelievable fitness, and we'll come to talk about that in a minute in terms of the running stats yesterday must have been through the roof. I know they went away earlier on the year for a training camp. They really do look in peak fitness. They have 3 or 4 players that in any given game, and we've seen this over the last 4 or 5 years, the proof has been there that the likes of Kieran Thompson, Michael Langan when he plays, McBurdy when he comes out the field, Michael Murphy, of course, Patton himself, these guys can all score from 40 yards. They have Kieran Thompson say brilliant boot on him, so they've got a lot of players that can do that. Darrell Beale, we've seen that yesterday from him as well. So they've got a lot of options, for players to come out the field. They're quite a physical team as well in terms of size. As I say, they've got great runners, especially when we're talking about the transition in the game now, bringing more wing backs forward, guys trying to get up the field. You look yesterday at Moore, you look at Rorty, you look at, Ryan McHugh, even Pater Mungan from wing back. These guys getting up the park. So, I just think Donegal are the one team for me that this suits. You look at even in the old rules last year, Donegal possibly think they probably left one behind them. Again, Galway in Croke Park, and that was without Michael Murphy. And McGuinness just back in for his first year. So I think they're further on down the line. They've blooded some new players this year. They look really all round. They look pretty, very strong actually. And I would temper what you said earlier. I'm not sure if Donegal would be overly happy with patches of their display yesterday, particularly in the first 15 minutes defensively.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Certainly. And I think that, having picked up the paper very early this morning, the Irish Times, and having read one or two things throughout the day, Patrick McBurty's come out and I think he's hit the nail on the head by saying, look, they've some stuff they've got to work on. A 10-point win in the Ulster Championship against Derry, a Division 1 Derry, in any given day, of course, is a great result. But that has to be tempered with, Derry, the manner in which Derry lay down. And we'll come to talk about that. But I think Donegal have still some work to do. And the other thing I'd like to say is, whilst I tipped Donegal for the All-Ireland, I think it's going to be incredibly hard for them to win Ulster. And let me just say this. They played a Division 1 team in Derry. They've come through that. They've come through that pretty unscathed, really not getting out of second or third gear. They now go to a Monaghan team who are resurgent, who have just gone up a league, who are on a bit of a momentum swing. They didn't start the league great, but they finished it very, very strongly. A Monaghan team where Micheál Brannigan, Jack McCrone, all of these guys, are shooting the lights out and who are going to go into that game, very high in confidence. Even if Donegal do come through that game, you're looking, no disrespect to your own county in Cavan, but you would be expecting the winner of that Monaghan-Donegal game to then play Tyrone, another Division 1 team in an Ulster semi-final. And then whoever wins that game, you would be expecting to play Armagh, another Division 1 team. So if Donegal are to win the Ulster Championship this year, realistically, they're going to have to beat 4 teams that are, top end of Division 2 or in Division 1. And that's very hard run. And when you look at any given year in an Ulster Championship, it's very hard to put 4 strong back-to-back performances together. There's always going to be a difficult day out for you, and it's about getting over the line and that. So, look, Donegal have a lot of work ahead of them. I don't think they'll be blown away by their performance yesterday in Ballybofey. But look, going down the stretch in the summer, I think that they're very, very strong contenders. And, the firepower that they have, the transition power and the running power that they have, and what's also coming off the bench for them is very, very strong. So, look, I think Donegal supporters can be quietly confident moving forward that they'll be in Croke Park at the business end of the championship.
Yeah, Jim McGuinness, I think, as you rightly said numerous times, he's probably playing in the long grass, and he's a very, very good operator. And obviously Michael Murphy playing there yesterday. And it's funny, we kind of, I suppose, bemoaned Mr. Forker the last day, and then obviously Murphy got a last minute tackle in as well. So there is the bit of boundless in him too.
Yeah, of course. You got a yellow card yesterday. Look, I think it was a yellow card. Others say it was a closed fist, and look, you can have doctors differ, patients die. People could maybe say it's a red. I don't think it was. Michael is, no doubt, he's a very competitive player. He's a winner. He's not back in Donegal just for a swamp song and to make up the numbers. He wants to go back there. He wants to win. He's a very passionate footballer. And we've seen, the one thing I would say about Donegal yesterday, Kieran Thompson didn't have his best game, who's usually an outstanding footballer. As I said, at the back earlier on, they looked a wee bit exposed. And Michael Murphy drifted in and out of the game a wee bit yesterday. And obviously he's only come back in training this past 2, 3, 4 months. So, his fitness will be just getting there now. So, look, I would expect more to come from him. What I did like about him is how Donegal utilised him yesterday in different places. If you remember the long kick out that Patton had, he caught outright on I think it was about the 40 in the first half. He caught on the 45-yard line, clean catch, let it off, scored for Donegal. He's a big physical man. And then in the second half, we've seen a wee bit something different where he comes from deep. I think Brendan Rodgers is actually marking him, and he makes a run from deep, a diagonal run from deep. He gets a hand pass off and he's inside the shooting zone and it's over the bar for him. So that running power from deep as well. And I think that that's something that Donegal can use to their advantage this year. Where they play Michael Murphy, do they play him out around the middle at certain times to win the ball? Do they have him as a plan B inside in attack for a big long kick in from somebody like Thompson or Langan when he plays, or these guys to win primary possession, lay it off the likes of McBurty and O'Beal, Darrell Wheel and these boys coming off him. So look, I'm quite intrigued actually how Jim will use him, and I was quite. It was quite interesting what he said actually earlier on in the league when how he was going to use Michael Murphy this year, and that was quite an interesting thing. So, look, I don't know. Maybe the next day he starts on the bench, comes on, and maximizes him for 25, 30 minutes, but. Look, yeah. Donegal have a super player there. A guy can win his own primary possession. He can play it around the 40. He can kick scores from outside that 45, them crucial, or 35 yards, them crucial 2-pointers. So, that'll be one of the side narratives of the season is really how Donegal utilise Murphy.
Derry, Kevy, a tough day in Donegal for them yesterday, and obviously Shane McGuigan missed the penalty. It just really looked like when they missed the penalty, kind of heads kind of fell down a bit, and confidence was kind of lacking throughout the game after that. But you kind of look at Derry, potential All-Ireland contenders maybe 3-4 years ago, and it just really feels like they've kind of slipped down. Maybe standards have slipped, and it's very disappointing for that group of players, really.
It is and it isn't. Look, I think the one picture that Derry people or even just GA enthusiasts watched the match yesterday was when Shane McGuigan misses the penalty, the camera flicks over to Paddy Talley. Mm. And if you see Paddy's maybe going up the line and it doesn't maybe show you who he's shouting at, but I think it was McGuigan after it saying, get the head up, It was as if Paddy Talley knew that this was going to have almost a detrimental negative effect upon the team. 100%, yeah. Now, what I would say is I've been very critical of Derry in terms of this season. I do think that they had 2 or 3 decent performances in the league. Let's not forget they possibly should have turned over Kerry and Celtic Park. Mayo is a game where they got a point out of and possibly should have won that game. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Donegal game that they actually played, I think that was in Letterkenny. They played that game. They actually led Donegal for most of the first 60 minutes of that game. Donegal just got on top of them coming down the last 5-10 minutes or so. So, they were in games this year. But Paddy, for me, is a very defensive coach. I've said this to you before. And Derry also seemed to me they're over-reliant on the Lachlan Murrays and the Shane McGuigans of this world to get them scores. You need, as we've seen with Donegal yesterday, you need a raft of different scores. You need when you look at Moore and Rahary coming forward yesterday, 2 your cornerbacks scoring, Ryan McHugh's always coming forward, the 2 midfielders, Hugh McFadden, these guys, they like to go forward. It wasn't as if we've seen a lot of marauding forward from the Derry cornerbacks or wing backs at times. And look, the one thing I would think that many Derry people would agree with me on, you cannot be static in any modern sport. If we look at basketball, 24 seconds to get that ball up the court. If we look at rugby, it's all about, the transition from when you turn over the ball, how you can hit the other team in the break. Modern soccer is the same. It's all about transition from back to front as quick as possible, moving a defensive about to try and get that opening. Derry were so lethargic at times yesterday. It was so slow. It was so poor. Like, Kieran McFall is a very workmanlike player.
Class player, yeah.
A player I really like. Gets on a lot of ball, goes through a lot of. He's very industrious, goes through a lot of energy and work. But yesterday he was slowing it down a lot. And I think the antithesis of this, if you move it, if people want to watch the game back, the antithesis of this, what the point I'm trying to make was, at one stage yesterday in the first half, as Donegal were taking the town goal, if you're looking up towards the town, on the right-hand side under the covered stand, Pádraig McGrogan had the ball. And under the left-hand side where the media box is and the terrace and the tunnel is there, Paul Diamond was out on his own and he was shouting at McGrogan, "Give me the ball, I'm in space." And it was so slow, so lethargic, which allowed Donegal to get themselves set up at the back. And eventually what happened is, I'm not sure if it was Paul Cassidy or somebody else, they went into contact and the ball was turned over. And the crowd, I think it was Brendan McCole, maybe turned the ball over. I think Rory was in around him as well. It was a two-man tackle, turnover ball. Donegal hits him on the burst and scored at the other end. And that just sort of summed up Derry's day yesterday. And another one is I've just got it noted down here. In the 23rd or 24th minute, Sean Patton takes a kick out down the pitch. Obviously, Donegal are playing down towards the River Finn behind the goal. And if you watch, three of Donegal players go out towards the stand and Ryan McHugh goes the other way. And Patton hits a long kick and gets Ryan McHugh on the ball underneath where the tunnel is. And within less than 2 seconds, he switched the ball to the other side of the field. I think Murphy's involved. And it's Peter Mongan, the number 7, coming through, who's a spare man, and kicks the ball over the bar. From back to front, without a Derry hand touching the ball, the speed of ball and speed of movement and the accuracy of the kick out, Ryan McHugh getting the ball, a great delivery in. Murphy hands on, draws in the defender, hands off, and the ball's over the bar. That's the speed that we're talking about. And it was late in day between the two teams yesterday. And this is where I really think Donegal really need to capitalise on other teams. I think they've so much pace and running power that they can do that to teams. And I think Derry will come away from their performance. Look, you have to give Paddy Talley a bit of credit. You're wondering what a manager's going to do at half-time. He comes in and straight after half-time, Derry come out and start to produce a wee bit. And look, there's a kick of a ball maybe between them by the time that Donegal start pulling away. It's that first 5-7 minutes of the second half, Derry looked to be, they looked to be getting on grips. But then all of a sudden, it turns around. And if we actually look, in the first 18 minutes of the second half, sorry, my phone's just fallen. In the first 18 minutes of the second half, Donegal playing up towards a town end, scored more in that first 18 minutes of the second half, created more chances than Derry did in the whole of the 35 minutes of the first half. And that just shows you, Donegal's willingness to attack, the amount of players that wanted to get forward, that sense of adventure, or want to get up and want to score, or want to help out, or want to run from deep. And they were hungry. Donegal were hungry in patches yesterday. I say they've a lot to improve on. I'll come to that in a second. But on the flip side of that, Derry looked, as you say, Brendan Rodgers took a fight to Donegal. He was somebody that was up for the game, and he was ready to, run and tackle, and despite things not going his way. The rest of Lachlan Murray, he got on a few balls and tried around his man. The rest of the guys looked. There was no hunger, there was no will, there was no obvious signs to the naked eye or the neutral at the match that Derry were there to put in a hell of a performance. There was no 2 or 3 guys getting around a player to tackle in numbers, to turn over the ball. There was no hunger, and it was plainly obvious to see. And in a way, they rolled over. And I suppose, John, I want to focus in on this. Paddy Talley must take some of the blame in terms of the kick out. Now, he played McNicholl in goal. McNicholl, I don't think, plays in goal for his club.
No, he's outfield, yeah.
And there is absolutely no doubts that was half of Derry's problem yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
They put themselves under so much pressure by poor kickouts, by inability to find a player from a short kickout in terms of outside that arc. They struggled all day with Donegal's physicality. Hugh McFadden broke a lot of ball. Michael Murphy was in around there. Even Kieran Thompson picked up one or two poor, shorter kickouts. So, that was part of Derry's problem yesterday. And the failure even to try and change that or have an option B or an option C, that was just plain to see. I mean, I was sitting looking at the TV, almost shouting at the TV myself, saying, can you stop asking this boy to kick the ball out, because it's just coming straight back in upon yourselves? Can you try and think of doing something different here? It was just ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, that tactic. And if Derry want to do anything, they're going to have to go back and revisit that moving forward, when they next get back out.
Crazy stuff. And God, I thought we were going by this. And I seen Cavan doing in 2022 Tottenham Cup final. I think one of our players was going backwards with the ball, soloing backwards with the ball. I nearly hit the TV a box when I seen it. Kieran McFall soloing backwards with the ball with the new rules, Kevy. It's about getting up the field. These new rules are promoting attacking football. McFall's a positive footballer. He's an incredible footballer when he wants to be. I think Paddy Talley needs to find his proper role. But Jesus Christ, don't go back with the football. Don't solo back with the football. Them days have to be behind us, Kevy.
No, not necessarily, John. And I want to temper this. I understand what you're saying, but I'm most interested in ball retention, game management. If we look at somebody that was on show yesterday,
if they're not scoring, Kevy, they weren't scoring.
Yeah, but John, you don't want to be running down into cul-de-sacs and losing ball and ball turnover. Possession is 9/10 of the law. If you look at somebody's game management and game IQ yesterday, like Ryan McHugh rarely loses a ball. He retains possession. Sometimes it's just not on. And sometimes you have to think about, right, I need to come back a wee bit to recycle the ball across, to try the other side of the pitch, to come back across, to try here, to wait for a strong runner like somebody like Murphy, who's physically big, to come through, or Kieran Thompson, or even to go crash ball in the tackle myself, and then lay the ball out backwards for that big swinging kick from 35 yards. So if you need to go backwards to the ball, and when I was coaching, I always said that there is no law in the game to say that you can't walk backwards with the ball. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I'd rather have a guy walk backwards with the ball slow and lethargically than going into contact and losing the ball. So I slightly disagree with you there. In terms of Kieran McFall is a very funny one. He's a bit like Peter Hart in a way. For me, Peter Hart in this game, moving forward, I think Tyrone, I said this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think Tyrone have to play him at wing back or centre back. I think Peter Hart is dynamite coming from deep. And I think Kieran McFall is the same. And I think that Paddy Talley maybe needs to go back, play him where the ball's going up front and inside forward maybe gets the ball, is maybe held up, and then you've got Kieran McFall coming from deep. He's a very dangerous runner from deep. And we've seen once or twice yesterday, Derry, in the first 15 minutes. Indeed, the goal that Dan Higgins takes very, very well. That's an excellent move where runners coming from deep, nice integral hand pass in 1-2 to make that chance and then score the goal. So McFall is certainly somebody that can come from deep. I think that's his best position. But he's a very versatile player, and that's probably the reason why Paddy's experimenting with him all over the park. But in terms of Derry moving forward, it's I certainly think it's going to be a very, very difficult season for them. I said that to you 2 weeks into the National League. I don't see them cutting any delf into the championship, really. Psychologically, you got to think what impact that game had on them yesterday. Moving forward, they've probably 3, 4, 5 weeks before they're out again, and that in that time, they're going to do some hard training. But realistically, you've got to think of the effect that the season's had on them thus far, week after week, losing against quality opposition, and you just gotta look at how you change that mindset.
Big thing, Kevy. I don't think me and would we make good assistant managers? We disagree like mad, would we?
As I say, John, people will have different views on everything. Who's going to win the All-Ireland?
But
Who's a better player? What best position?
but Kevin, I swear to God, I nearly had PDS or what's that post-traumatic stress when I seen McFall, because I just seen Cavan do it so many times. But then again, we just probably didn't have the force to kick the ball into. Last question, Kevin. Rory Gallagher situation. I suppose Horst Delvins comes this morning on Colin Parks' podcast. Is Gallagher the man to bring back?
That's really a matter for the Derry County Board. And it'll be a difficult decision for them, of course. If they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I think the other issue before we even get into Rory Gallagher is Derry people, Derry players, Derry County Board. They're going to have to take some blame as well, because Gavin Devlin was there with Mickey Hart. Certainly my issue is if it's not broke, you don't have to fix it. Regardless of Rory Gallagher or Kieran Meehan being there, the team was handed over to Mickey Hart. They won a National League. Let's not forget that. They won a National League inside Croke Park. And with a lot of these players as the cornerstone of that team. And it was Derry who got rid of Mickey Hart, not the other way about. So be careful what you wish for, and that's my issue to Derry. So look, Paddy Tally's in that role at the minute. Whether he stays there or not, I suppose, is up to the players and up to the Derry management. There's no doubts we've seen in the last 24 hours Philip McMahon coming out saying that he was offered the job. There was a very, very long time before Paddy Tally was appointed. Look, Paddy Tally made a brave decision. He could have sat comfortably as the number 2. Great coach that he is down in Kerry. Knew down there that he had a fairly decent chance of success and being at the latter end of the championship. He braved it. He came back up the road. He took on a very pressurised job. If you consider what Derry have done over the last 3-4 years under Gallagher, under interimly under Kieran Meehan, and then under Mickey Hart, he took over a Derry team that had won the National Football League last year and had over the last couple of years had gone deep into the championship. So I don't know where to go from here. But the Gallagher situation is a totally different question for the county board. And what I'd say is they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And if the players want Rory Gallagher, then that's a big decision for the county board.
It's a massive statement for Horst Devlin to make this morning, especially as you rightly just said, he was with Mickey Hart. Like it's funny, Horst has that mindset now after stepping away from the Derry thing, and throughout it, he probably think Guy or you lads probably really want Rory. Like it's a funny sort of mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's been in the inside, so we have to take it that is what he's saying is there's a fair degree. There's a fair degree of accuracy in what he's saying, because he's obviously been there, and he's obviously been around the guys, knows the mentality. So I would say that he's a very good source to have, and he's been in the inside. So therefore, I would take what he's saying as probably gospel.
Yeah, very interesting. And I suppose news in the last couple of days as well, Kevy, Rory is going to go, I suppose, after Jarlath Burns and the GA, after comments made by Jarlath, and I suppose Jarlath Burns stepping in with the whole Naas situation, and obviously Rory's going after the two associations, I suppose, and he's kind of standing up for what he believes in, Kevy.
Yeah, well, that's his prerogative, and look, I don't want to get into this, and I don't think we should speculate. We should just let this play out. But obviously, Fergal Logan and the team that represents Rory will be moving this forward, and hopefully we get it sorted out as quick as possible, because we don't want this being a sideshow for this year's. We want to concentrate on the football, and we want to concentrate on trying to use podcasts like this to articulate and highlight tactics and the great players that we have and the great games that we have and the great ambassadors that we have. So look, hopefully it gets sorted out sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, Kevin, absolutely. And then we will move on to other action that took place yesterday in the Leinster Senior Football Championship. Round 1, it was Meath against Carlow. It was Meath 130, Carlow 19 points in Park Talton. Obviously, a lot of, I suppose, news in recent weeks about the Meath set up, and obviously Joe McMahon and Marty Curry have departed the Meath set up in recent weeks, and obviously Joe Murphy has took over as the Carlow manager after Shane Curran stepping away. But fair play to Joe, obviously taking up the mantle of the Carlow lads, and then obviously two quality coaches after leaving Meath. But Meath got the job done yesterday. They'd be happy enough, but There's a lot of stuff to get sorted in that Meath setup and Meath County Board.
Yeah, look, I don't want to dwell on it too long. I think a lot of the other games, bar the Sligo Mayo game this weekend, a lot of the games were heavily one-sided. Obviously, first week of the championship, this is the way it's been, and we'll come to speak about that in a second. Look, Carlow were always on ahead to nothing. Division 4 team against a Division 2 team. What's happened in Carlow over the last 2 to 3 weeks was obviously going to have a severe detrimental effect. Losing your manager so close to the championship, not having a great Division 4 campaign whatsoever, and then having to go in and get somebody to come in 2 weeks out of championship. That's no preparation at all. That's just a nonsense. Regardless of all that, we probably knew anyway that Carlow would succumb to a much stronger Meath team. And look, I don't think there's a lot to fix in Meath in a way, if you hear me out on this. You know, Robbie's come in there this year. They've had a very decent league, in my opinion. They're 1 or 2 wins away. And they were fighting relegation over the last 3-4 seasons out of 2. They've moved up and they're a bit like Cork. They're maybe 1 or 2 big wins away from getting up to that Division 1. And obviously, you know, there's a slight bit more consistency there this year than there has been over the last couple of years. Some of the older players have stepped away. But look, there's bigger fish to fry for me than for the likes of Laois, who also played at the weekend. You know, we obviously know that Dublin now think it's Awfully and Kildare are already through. You know, they're already, you know, quarter finalists. So look, the Leinster Championship always takes a wee while to get going, to get towards the business end of things. And look, it's a routine win for me. I don't think anybody expected anything less. Added into that, you know, the problems that Carlow had coming into the game. And now obviously Carlow have to regroup now for the Tailteann Cup in the next 2-3 weeks. And look, that'll be their focus. But like many other counties in Division 4, including my own county, Antrim, probably the championship's a bit of a sideshow. It's about getting out of that graveyard that is Division 4, getting up a league, getting more quality games against quality opposition, and then giving the Tailteann Cup a lash when you're in Division 3. So, you know, that's where they're at. For me, then Robbie, let's see how far they can go in the Leinster Championship.
Mm-hmm.
A bare minimum is a semi-final.
Mm-hmm.
For me, for any Meath manager, a bare minimum is a semi-final. And if they can get into a Leinster final, well, that'll be all well and good. And then a bit of a run in the championship. But look, as I say, bigger fish to fry. You know, scoring 130, you know, good high scoring. But yeah, bigger days out for me.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin, absolutely. And then we'll move on to the other action that took place over the weekend in the, let me see here, the Leinster Senior Football Championship. It was Longford 120, Wicklow 223 in Glenbro's Pearse Park after extra time. A very, very good win for Oisin McComb's Wicklow there. They'll be absolutely delighted with that. And then action that took place in the Connacht Senior Football Championship over the weekend in the quarterfinals. It was New York against Galway. It was New York 20 points, Galway 328 in Gaelic Park. Very good win for Pork Joyce and Galway here, I suppose. Really, Kevy, job done, box ticked, and I suppose result got. And look, as you said, probably a foregone conclusion and a very, very handsome win.
Yeah, 31 scores from Galway. Again, the likes of Sean Kelly and Matthew Tierney, I think, made Team of the Week this week. But realistically, we're looking at a Galway side here that was, up until the last week of the league, was top of the league. You know, had excellent wins against other opposition in Division 1, you know. And they're playing a team that hasn't had a game all year. And so that only signals one thing. As I say, the early rounds in a lot of these championships, bar Ulster, are just sparring games, and getting guys game time run-outs and whatever else. So, look, Galway had to go there. They had to do a professional job. We know over the last number of years, the likes of Leitrim and Sligo have struggled in Gaelic Park, and have been brought into extra time. In fact, wasn't Leitrim lost in Gaelic Park last year, the year before? So, I mean, there's always a potential of a banana skin when you go away, or boys losing the plot and going on the beer, whatever else. You know, travel over on the Thursday for the game on the Sunday. Galway have gone. They've got the job done. They've scored heavily. And look, box ticked. Roscommon now, you know, getting down to the business end of things in a couple of weeks' time, which will be a very good game for them. Given again, Roscommon, quite similar to Galway, went to Roy Slip, scored quite heavily. I think Dermot Murtagh's in Team of the Week as well this week.
Yeah.
So again, that was a box ticking exercise for them. Again, going to London, very professional performance, especially after coming off the back of that Monaghan defeat only 7 days beforehand. That's Roscommon, game under the belt. They've got in and got out. Very no injuries, and coming back home. Then it's all focused now on Galway, and that should be an absolute belting game.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to that one. So, look, as I say, shadow boxing, but job's done.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevy, absolutely. And then the other game in the Connacht Senior Football Championship yesterday, Kevy, it was Mayo against Sligo. It was Mayo 220, Sligo 217 in Hastings Insurance. McHale Park, a 3-point win for Mayo at home against Sligo, Kevy. That's not good signs for the championship. Or is it?
Look, I'm quite frustrated. I read 3 Irish broadsheets today online. So I read the Irish Times, I read the Indo, and I suppose the Irish News. And I found the headlines a wee bit sensational, if I'm quite frank with you. Sligo, as we heard here on paper, you've got a team at the bottom end of Division 3 against a team obviously at the top end of Division 1 playing in the league final just last week. Mayo had less than 7 days recovery to go into this game. The other thing about it is we had John Maughan on the last time I was on this, who fair play to John, hope he watches in this one, because he did say, give him credit where it's due, that he was speaking to boys up in Sligo and that Mayo would not have it easy. If you remember, we talked about young Pat Spillane, who again had a very decent game, when he was talking about, how last year Sligo had been very, very unfortunate not to beat Galway, or at least bring Galway to extra time. So, look, there was some form coming into this in terms of Sligo giving other teams in the big 3 in Connacht a game and not being ruled over. And let's give them credit. I think McEntee said after the game that, he wants to give his players credit, and rightly so. They never give in. They went down to McHale Park. The conventional wisdom would have told you going into the game that probably it would be an easy win for Mayo, given the embarrassment of riches they have, maybe compared to Sligo. But look, Kevin McStay said today, bucket loads of work to be done. And I think that can only be a good thing. That's what Mayo people need to run into. Okay, it's not a great performance, but they've got a very competitive game. They understand that there's lots and lots of work to be done. And that can only be a good thing moving forward. They'll now, with all due respect, they'll go into a Connacht semi-final where they'll absolutely bowl over Leitrim, who are in absolute disarray. That won't even be a game. It'll be a hockey-in match. And it will not help Mayo any. In fact, an internal A versus B game will probably be better for Mayo. But just some of the points I picked up. Jack Carney really playing well this season for Mayo. Kicked not 3 yesterday. Fergal Boland, who's a guy I like. Very like Kieran McFall, or a lot of wing forwards. He came off the bench yesterday and kicked not 2. He's a very industrial player. McHale's really come to the fore this year, which, he kicked not 4 yesterday. And, of course, Aidan O'Shea's display. If you read the Irish papers, Aidan O'Shea was the difference between the two teams. There's a lot to be said about that, about him winning primary possession. Again, we spoke about at the top of the programme about Michael Murphy. Be interesting to see if O'Shea moves out around the middle. Did they play him, in around full forward and then bring him out as well? He can score from distance. He's a great runner, great strength runner from deep as well. Obviously, he's kicking on in years a wee bit, so they maybe need to be very careful about, how they manage that game time. But certainly, he's somebody that is a big asset to them. Ran O'Donoghue scoring a very early goal again yesterday. Somebody that, if Mayo would have any chance of the All-Ireland, he's got to have a really good, consistent season, a bit like O'Shea. So, the game turned on its head really with that O'Shea goal at the start of the second half. And the fact that just after, I think it was Cian Lally, he scored a point, but really it was a goal opportunity. And if that goes into the net, it was a 1-point game, I think. Instead, I think it was a 3-point game because it went over the bar. It was a 1-point game if it went into the net. Pat Spillane Jr. had a shot cleared off the line as well at one stage. So, look, Mayo rode their luck a wee bit, or big bit, sorry, should I say. And look, credit where it's due to Sligo. Their full forward line kicked 210 between them, which was an excellent return. So look, Mayo march on. They'll be in a Connacht final regardless now. And that's where they want to be. And they'll get another quality game against Galway or Mayo before the real championship starts. As for Sligo, real bright shoots. They've come up a league. They've stayed in that league. They come up the Antrim this year and a big victory there to stay in the league. The last 2 years under McEntee, they've had real good, strong first round performances against, top end of Division 1 teams. And look, they'll be a dark horse for the Tailteann Cup this year. There's absolutely no doubts about it. And with that full forward line kicking on, and if they're able to take their chances, that they got yesterday and be that wee bit more ruthless, they'll be there at business end of the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin, absolutely. And then we'll move on to other action that took place over the weekend in the Munster Senior Football Championship quarter-finals on Saturday. It was Tipperary against Waterford. It was Tipperary 122, Waterford 119 in FBD Semple Stadium. Obviously, very, very good performance by the Waterford lads. They'll be delighted with that. Obviously, just not get the result, but still a very, very good performance. And then
just quickly on that. Yeah, because when you consider where Waterford are in the National League, they're rock bottom of the 32. So I mean, Tipperary obviously have gone back over the last decade or so. They're top end of Division 4. So look, 2 Division 4 teams, but I think most people would have tipped Tipperary to win the game. Bit closer than it was, but look, Tip go into a semi-final now, and that's the real big game against Clare, and that's a chance to get their Munster final. Clare will be favourites for that, but look, all Tip can do is what's put in front of them, and they're now in their Munster semi-final.
Yeah, it's a really good performance with Waterford, but they have to be delighted with that because other kind of Munster games in the past have really bowled over and just kind of let teams beat them very well. So I think they can draw a lot of confidence in that game at the weekend, and fair play to the lads. And then in the last game in the Munster Championship over the weekend, it was Cork against Limerick. It was Cork 24 points, Limerick 13 points in the TOS Gaelic grounds in Limerick. Very good win for Cork here, Kev. And obviously you were on the podcast a couple of weeks ago saying about, I suppose, Cork's misfortunes, and obviously Mayo, great. John Mahon was in agreement with you, but obviously a very good win at the weekend. But look, can Cork do anything in the semi-final? That is the problem.
Yeah, Brian Hurley to the fore again up front. But look, Cork will not be judged again. It's always great to go up to Limerick and get a win. Obviously Limerick have had a decent league, but to go up there, it was always expected a Cork victory. They've gone up and ticked that box, but the big thing now is what they can do against Kerry. I don't think they have enough to beat Kerry. I don't think it's going to be an upset like a few years back down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But for me, it's about a performance for Cork. Cork are one of these teams that I think can maybe be that dark horse this year in the championship if they get a run or two. They can on any given day beat a Roscommon, beat a Monaghan, possibly beat an Armagh. So, there is talent there, and it's about how they nurture that. Look, John Cleary's in the second year. Kevin Walsh is down there coaching as well. By all accounts, a very good coach. So, look, let's see if they put in a half-decent performance against Kerry, and then they can build on that. As I say, I don't think they've enough firepower to beat Kerry. But, look, if they can get a decent performance from that and build on it, and then, when they get into the All-Ireland series, maybe take a scalp or two.
Absolutely, Kevin. The other action, and you touched on it briefly there a couple of minutes ago in the Connacht Senior Football Championship quarter-final, it was London against Roscommon. It was London 13 points, Roscommon 226 in Ruislip. Obviously a very good win for Roscommon, but I think very much expected. Stretch the legs, and I suppose kind of give lads game time, but I think this is very much a result we all expected. And Roscommon march into the Connacht semi-final in a couple of weeks' time. And then the other game over the weekend in the Leinster Senior Football Championship, it was Wexford 211, Laois 221 in Chadwick's Wexford Park. Kevin, home advantage doesn't count for much these days.
No, and I was expecting a closer game. There's no doubts about it. Wexford had a good league, I suppose Justin would be happy enough with the outcome and the result. Look, the big issue here is Laois started really, really well, pounded into a decent lead, and obviously Wexford then couldn't really come back into the game. But I think it was Paul Kerwin maybe made team of the week, cornerback. So obviously a good performance from him. But look, as I say, Laois are now where they want to be in a Leinster quarter final. They'll be playing against good opposition. So I think it's Louth up for them, is it next?
Yeah.
And that'll be a good test for them. And you know what? Louth there's maybe only 5 or 6 league places between the two of them if you take where Louth finished up and where Laois finished up. So look, there's possibility of a scalp there, and scoring heavily. Justin will be happy enough with that. And look, there'll be underdogs going in against Louth. I think Louth have made the last 3 or 4 Leinster semi-finals. So look, if they can get in there and maybe take a scalp, that'll be a big one for Laois.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great stuff, Kevy. I suppose we will move on to this weekend's championship action on the 12th of April in the Ulster Senior Football Championship quarterfinal. It's the very much anticipated quarterfinal between Antrim and Armagh in Carrigan Park at 12:30. And of course, the game will be live on BBC NI, your old stomping ground, Kevy, on both accounts, BBC and Carrigan Park. Well, Kevy, we reached the summit. The game is going to be played in Carrigan Park after all the talk, after all the nonsense. Fair play to Antrim for sticking to the guns, but the result's inevitable. The time of 12:30 for supporters is an absolute shambles. But your thoughts ahead of this game, Kevy?
Well, I think as we move closer to integration and Mary McAleese and her committee coming forward with that report, I think it's 2027. I think one of the reasons is that I think Armagh ladies playing the All-Ireland, the National League final at 5:30 in Dublin. So look, there is a bit of coordination to it. But it's a poor enough timing. Look, the game rightly is going ahead. It's Antrim's home advantage. I think give Armagh, Ciara McGeeney and the Armagh County Board credit where it's due. They didn't stand in Antrim's way. The sporting integrity of the competition was kept. So a lot of credit to Armagh on this. Look, again, very much not on the same level, but I would expect similar sort of Roscommon, London, New York, Galway sort of style. Armagh are All-Ireland champions. They're not going to be knocked off their perch. McGeeney has them purring pretty well. I mean, would they get 7 points in the National League this year in Division 1? That's pretty decent return for any team.
You said 7, sorry. You said 7, did you?
Yeah.
Well, 7 points altogether.
Yeah.
7 points.
Yeah.
But
I think they finished on 7 points in the league.
Sorry, Kevin. I thought you said they scored 7 points the whole league. Sorry.
No. They finished on 7 points in the league.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that was for a team that had just been promoted as well. So, I mean, that pretty decent return. Obviously, they've lost 1 or 2 forwards. They're going into the championship as strong favourites to make an Ulster final from that side of the draw. I don't think anybody would dispute that with the winner of this game playing down at Fermanagh. So, look, I think this will be one-way traffic. I don't think that this is Antrim's, this isn't their Everest as such. Antrim have bigger problems, and that was relegation to Division 4 after an extremely poor league. And look, Andy McEntee's in his 3rd year. I would probably suggest this might be his last. And I really don't think, obviously I believe that Armagh will win this and win it at a canter. But then even the Tolton Cup for Antrim, I think there's teams further on down the line, whether that be the Offaly's, the Laois, even the Clares of this world, that I think are further on down the line than Antrim at this time. Fermanagh, teams like that. So, look, it'll be a tick box exercise for Ciara McGeeney and his side. They will go in, they will take it professionally. And as I say, they'll be a very, very difficult team to dethrone this year because I have to admit on this podcast, I was very, very surprised that Armagh won the All-Ireland last year, but credit where it's due. And McGeeney had them purring exceptionally well. And he's got them, they've come back in this year and they've took a couple of scalps, and they're going to be in around the business end of this season. So it starts this week, but they'll not have too much trouble getting out of Corrigan Park.
Yeah, and I suppose not to prolong it, Kevin, like, but obviously you played for Antrim for many years, and obviously these big games, week leading into it, like you would have played the great Armagh teams, Tyrone teams, and like, look, let's be realistic, layman's terms here, Kevin. If you're an Antrim player this week, what's the thoughts and emotions heading into this game?
Well, you try and be as as professional as possible. You obviously know maybe at the back of your head that you're going in against a pretty formidable force. But look, one thing a lot of the players in my era, a lot of the Coggan players, a lot of St. Gall's players had, is they had a lot of great self-belief in their own abilities. Okay, sometimes that borders on arrogance or whatever else, but you want to compete against like, if you remember, Armagh won the All-Ireland in 03, we played them in the back door after Monaghan beat them in 03 in the first round. We played them in the back door. Saturday night, Casement Park, absolutely packed to the rafters after Tyrone had beat us the week before in an Ulster semi-final. We played 2 weeks in a row, packed the rafters against Tyrone and Armagh. Armagh beat us by about 4 or 5 that night. You're up against Aidan O'Rourke. I think I marked Aidan O'Rourke, McGeaney, and Andrew McCann in that match. 3 absolutely terrific players, all stars in their own right, all Ireland medalists. That's the sort of players you want to be pitting yourself against. McDonald, boys like Sean Kelly from my club, or marking people like Stevie McDonald or Oisin. That's great experience. But you probably know at the back of your mind that, look, you can go out and give as best as performance you get, but these teams are just further on down the line. They've more resources. They've a wider pick, if you want to put it that way. They've a plethora of talent at their disposal, and even when it's not going well, they dig deep into the bench, and they've got a lot coming off. So, look, you can just only believe in yourself and go out and try and pit yourself up against, excellent players and try and do your best. And I suppose, looking selfishly from it, not from a team perspective, but the outcome is almost inevitable. But it's about,
See, that's the tough bit, but that's what I'm talking about. That's the tough bit. Yeah.
But John, this is something I was going to mention, and hopefully this will get other pundits and viewers starting. The inevitability of the GA at the minute is becoming clear week on week. If we look at senior, that's fine. It's quite inevitable. But the further we go down, there's a huge gap developing in Ulster, and it's frightening. Massive. It really is frightening. Like, massive. I can rank you now. I can rank you now the 4 worst counties in Ulster. Cavan is 5th or 6th. Sorry, 7th is Down, 8th is Fermanagh, and 9th is Antrim. And people say, well, how do you know that? I look at what's happening at under 16 level. I look what's happening at minor level. The last couple of weeks at under 20 level for Antrim has not been nothing short of absolutely embarrassing. And the same for Fermanagh. Down got a bit of a hockey from Tyrone a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And you look at them counties like the Tyrones of this world, the Donegals of this world, and the
Derry.
The Derrys of this world, and to a lesser extent Armagh. I think Armagh made the All-Ireland minor final last year. You look at the last couple of under-20s finals, Tyrone have been thereabouts. Derry have won a couple of All-Irelands at minor and under-20 over the last 4 or 5 years. Donegal are putting in savage work. I think one of the Donegal schools made the McCrory Cup final again this year. So, they've got a lot of conveyor belt of talent coming through. Their under-20s beat Tyrone, I think, last week. They're very strong at that age group. So the gap in Ulster is very worrying, right from under 16 up. And you can predict the next 15 to 20 years almost of what's going to happen in Ulster. And it's going to be your Tyrones, your Armaghs, your Donegals, your Derrys. That's it. Monaghan land 5th. But even the other night, I think in the under-20s, Derry absolutely hockeyed Monaghan. I think it was 320 to 6 points. And that gives you an indication of what's going to come in a number of years. Again, we heard a good friend, Gary Rounds, and off the ball talking about the best Leitrim under-20 side in a number of years. And that might be well and true, and that's good. Hopefully a couple of them lads go on and represent, a lot of them are going on to represent Leitrim at under-20 level, but they still took a 7 or 8 point defeat to Galway. So, it's quite inevitable what's going to happen out west too. We're seeing Dublin and how strong they are at underage level. And then again, what's happening in down south in Kerry and Cork in terms of the other counties in Munster. So there's a huge predictability about the GA. So it's no surprise that maybe we're seeing the results we did in New York and in London, and we will see in Belfast this Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, Kevin. Well said. And yeah, it's absolutely very predictable at the very best of times, Mr. Kevin. And we will stick with Ulster on Sunday, the 13th of April, in the Ulster Senior Football Championship quarter final. It's Tyrone against my own County Cavan in Healy Park at 4:15. Of course, game will be live on RTE and BBC. And yes, it's a big game this weekend. Obviously, my own county going in after a relatively good league campaign up against a Tyrone team that have a very poor league campaign. So it's going to be a very interesting game on Sunday. Cavan really need to get over this Tyrone hoodoo and get one over the line against them. But it's a big task, especially going down to home, McKevy.
Yeah, no, I personally think that, you know, this again has a sense of inevitability about it. Cavan are quite a funny team in that they had a very mixed bag in the league. And look, in Ulster, unfortunately for them, they're in that position where they're just behind them 5 teams who are bouncing between the top of 2 and 1. And look, they are a solid Division 2 team. But look, Tyrone have had a very mixed bag in the league. Obviously, they got relegated. Again, I think they got 7 points, and that's no. That'll not worry them too much. Tyrone will bounce straight back up next season. It's all about championship in Tyrone. Look, they've been missing Paddy Hampshire for a while at the back, and under these new rules, as I said to you before, I think you need two or three really good inside defenders. What Tyrone really do have is an abundance of excellent attackers. You know, you look at the 2 Canavans, you look at Mark Bradley is back in the fold this year, and I think he's a really good player. And I think the new rules will suit him if he can get quick, good ball into him. You obviously have McCurry shooting the lights out as well in a couple of league games this year. He looks to get a bit of his mojo back. What they would want is Cathal McShane rediscovering some form.
Yeah,
And what I also think is we need to look at what's happening with the Tyrone midfield. Con Kirkpatrick's a bit of a funny one for me because I think Con's been the victim of being messed about a wee bit. He was when they won the All Ireland. What was it? 3 years ago now. Con was excellent. And many people believe he should have got an All-Star that year before Brian Kennedy. Brian Kennedy, again, has been quite consistent over the last couple of seasons. But Tyrone really need to get the 2 of them back playing as a partnership in the middle of the park because that has been a bit of an issue for them. The move Con to centre forward at one stage, and I don't really think that worked out for the best for everybody. You know, I think Con's best position is middle of the park. He's a very athletic lad, and him coming from deep as well, you know, with his physicality that can punch holes in defences, and you know that would be a huge asset for them. Interesting to see where Petey Hart plays, as I mentioned before. Is he going to play from deep? Matty Donnelly's another one I mentioned on the podcast the last time around. Hampshire, Matty Donnelly and Petey Hart, the 3 sort of older veterans of the team, if you want to put it that way. It's going to be really interesting to see where them guys fit in this year under Malachy. Look, if Tyrone again, if they're going to win the Ulster Championship, they're going to have to beat a fairly decent Cavan side. Then, if they do manage that, they're going to have a titanic battle against Donegal. In my opinion, Donegal will come through the Monaghan game. So it'll be really interesting to see how the game pans out. I think the other big problem for Cavan is they don't have enough fire stoppers at the back. You know, because even if Mark Bradley plays and he's not on song, one of the 2 Canavans plays, he's going to be on song. McCurry plays, he's going to be on song if Canavan isn't on song. Even if the 2 of them aren't on song, you're going to have Petey Hart, who's another terrific. I think Tyrone have just too many aces in their pack. And even for the guys that don't start, guys coming off the bench as well for Tyrone. You know, young O'Goose is an excellent footballer. You know, he's obviously had a good run with Errigal. Again, he can play wing forward for you. He can play midfield. He's a very athletic boy. And he's someone that maybe can come off the bench and make a huge difference for Tyrone this year. I know he played a bit last year, but, you know, he's a wee bit more mature now. He's got a good run with Errigal. And he's someone that should be thinking about, you know, how he breaks that glass ceiling into that team and nails down a place for himself. So look, there's a lot of ifs, buts, whys. What's going to happen with veteran players exactly with Tyrone? I do think they'll get over this hurdle. If Cavan are to have any chance, they need to neutralise a lot of these guys, but they also have to have a good start. And if you fall quickly behind any of them top four or five teams in Ulster, you're in big trouble. And Cavan can't afford to do that.
And obviously, news in recent weeks, Paddy Lynch has had another setback, and I don't think he's going to see any ball for Cavan, unfortunately, in this championship at all. I think he kind of, I wouldn't say they're rushing him back, but he's done a lot of work, and I think the knee's in even worse condition than it ever was. So, huge disappointment, Kevy.
Yeah, because Paddy Lynch is a marquee footballer. When he's on song like he was in the Ulster Championship a few years back, he's an absolute dream to watch. Lovely centre of gravity, can swing with both feet, and he will cause any defender up and down the country problems. The problem with Paddy Lynch playing for Cavan on Sunday, even if he was, Cavan don't have enough aces up there for me to trouble Tyrone. They don't have enough firepower, even coming off the bench, and that's a big issue. For many of these teams further on down the league, even in two, you look at your likes of your Meaves and your Cavans and possibly your Lives. They're always over reliant on two or three players taking over the scoreboard, and that can't happen. You're not going to beat quality opposition without happening. You also need to have quality coming off the bench, and unfortunately, these teams don't have the quality that the likes of the Tyrones of this world, or the Armaghs of this world have. So I do expect Tyrone to go there to have a very professional performance and to come away and go into an Ulster semi-final.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, well, hopefully it'll be a good game of football anyway, and we'll wait to see what happens on Sunday, Kevy. And then the other action over the weekend, you have the glorious Leinster Football Championship quarter-final on Saturday. It's Kildare against Westmeath in Connaught Park at 7 p.m. And of course, the game will be live on the brand new GAA Plus, Kevy.
Yep. This could be an absolute humdinger, and you know what? I'm going to put my neck on the line. I'm going to say Dermot McCabe's team are going to cause the slightest bit of upset. When you think about it, the two teams are so close in terms of their league positions. One finished, if you want to put it, 16th, and the other one finished 18th. So Kildare obviously coming back up into Division 2, and Westmeath being relegated. In saying that, Westmeath they've had a league where it would seem on the face of it that it's been a disappointing league because obviously they haven't got points on the board and they've been relegated. But that masquerades the actual reality, in that in each of them 7 or 8 games that they had, they were very much in the game. In fact, they were very unlucky not to take points from several of the games. They have boys like Lurkin O'Toole. They do have 4 or 5 excellent players, and sorry, the other point I want to make is one must also understand and factor in that Dermot McCabe lost 2 or 3 players, particularly Heslin, at the start of the year, and that 2 or 3 senior players, and when it starts off like that, you're always in an uphill battle. So look, Westmeath, they'll have to have an epic performance to get over the line because of the mentality situation there, where they've lost 7 games on the trot now, and that's a big issue. But look, they've been in all of them games, as I say. The game's been in the melting pot, and they've just come out on the wrong side of it. If they can get them back in there, hopefully they can learn from that. And I do think that Kildare. When we look at Kildare's performance against Offaly, it wasn't anything that you would be very much feared of. And Offaly cut them to shreds several times, especially in the second half. I thought Kildare looked a wee bit, it's the best way to put it, they looked tired in the middle of the second half. I don't know whether they had a hard couple of weeks training or what it may be, but let's remember they've been in Croke Park, less than 13 days since their last game. So Westmeath will be coming in with maybe an extra bit of weeks training under them. Who knows? So I'm going to go for a Westmeath victory in this, and I'm going to go for it after extra time.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think the bit of luck Derek McCabe needs, because they actually had a very good league performances. They couldn't get the job done, couldn't get the wins, but my God, they played some football and put up big scores, but it was gas. They didn't win one game. It's crazy, and it's a dog-eat-dog league, make no doubt about it. And in the other action on Sunday in the Leinster Senior Football Championship quarterfinals, Kevin, it's Louth against Laois in St. Connell's Park at 3 p.m.
Yeah, well, I spoke about this, but you know, Laois are just coming off the back of a win last week. It's a very quick turnaround time for them. Louth have obviously had quality games this year in Division 2, and I've coped really well. I'm really, really impressed with the setup. And now we spoke last time around about their setup, with Jared Brennan, who's a professional and down in UCD, obviously in this role. Obviously Niall Moynihan's involvement, with James McCartan's involvement in coaching there. The setup they have is really, really professional. Is Sam Roy still out, or we expect him to play? That could be a big issue within the game. Not only is he a good free taker, but he can score from outside the 2-point zone, and he's also very, very good at bringing other people into play. But it's very much not a one-man show. They're a very rounded team, and the guys there need to obviously taken over from Mickey Hart, who done a great job at the start. But over the last couple of seasons, Joe Brennan and his team have done an excellent job there, and a lot of people are maybe see them as favourites for going to another Leinster final this year. So they'll be hard to knock off the perch, and this is the sort of game that Laois now need to win. No point in Laois are a Division 3 team at the minute, the top end of Division 3. They now need to start looking at how they get over the Offleys of this world, how they get over the Kildures of this world, how they get over the Louths of this world, how they get over the Meaths of this world. That is the next bracket up. So this is their glass ceiling for the year, is beating a team on that level. And obviously Louth this weekend offers that. I'm going to go with the conventional wisdom here and go with Louth to win it. But there is a possibility of an upset. I just think it's a short turnaround time for Laois. I think Louth have a very professional setup. I think they have a better spread of scores and a better. I think they've had more quality against their opposition this year. And by the way, they're used to beating teams now over the last couple of seasons that possibly in the past they wouldn't have ever dreamed of beating. So look, there's a lot of confidence in the Louth camp, and look, it's a great story, as we spoke about with John Mahon last week, and fair play to Peter Fitzpatrick and all the committees down there in Louth who've been doing sterling work. They've got a new stadium coming along, the team's doing well, they've got a beautiful training ground. So look, credit where it's due.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And then the other games in the Leinster Championship over the weekend, it's Meath against Offaly in Park Talton at 2:30. Very interesting game, Kevin, here. Obviously, Offaly playing Division 2 football next year against Meath, who sustained themselves in Division 2 and done very, very well this year. That's going to be an interesting game this weekend.
Again, Offaly's glass ceiling. What Offaly have done this season is probably anything on top of what they have now done is a bonus. Depending on obviously if they're in the Sam Maguire and the Talchin. If they're in the Talchin, then you would be expecting them to be competing at the business end of that. Again, this is very much like Laois and Offaly. Laois and Louth. Offaly need to start now on the road to recovery from that great under-20 side that they had. This is now their glass ceiling. Teams like Meath, teams like Dublin. Obviously, I don't think they'll beat the Dubs, but teams like Meath, teams like Dublin, teams like Louth, that's where Offaly have got to be. They know they can beat the Kildures of this world. They know they can, compete at that level. So, it's a big, big test for Offaly in terms of they're young. They're still a bit raw. They're young there, but they've got a great guide in Mickey Hart. And if anybody knows how to motivate and guide a team, it's him. And the flip side of that, Meath, as I say, the very least that is expected from a Meath manager is probably a Leinster semi-final. We know where Meath football has plummeted to in the last decade, and it hasn't been pretty to watch. There is a huge possibility of a scalp here, and I wouldn't put it past Mickey Hart. But I'm going to go for Meath, and I tell you why I'm going. Meath are still a big physical team. And And I think that will count for a lot. They've also a decent amount of firepower up front. And I just believe that, that physicality might just take them over the line against the young Awfully side who are, I suppose, their trajectory is upwards. Meath is very much static, but I still expect Meath maybe to just about pull through this one, possibly another extra time.
Absolutely, Kevin. Then, it doesn't get any easier in the Leinster Championship here. We have, let me see there now. Yes, we have in the last game, Dublin. Where's that gone? I just went on this up there. Sorry. We have. Geez, on Sunday. Yeah, we have Wicklow against Dublin in Aughrim at 2 p.m. Yeah, like again, moving on to like the Leinster Championship once again, Kevin, it's just going to be cricket score stuff, unfortunately, and stretch the legs to Dublin. And obviously, news that John Small is coming back to the Dublin setup will definitely please Desi Farrell, but it's going to be a long day on Sunday for Roisin McConville.
Yeah, again, a mismatch and not one we want to spend too much time on. Unfortunately, these teams are worlds apart. Obviously, Oisín would be very happy with the character his side showed last weekend to pull through an extra time. But you just wonder what sort of effect even that would have, even if they were playing a live this weekend or an Awfully this weekend. It's a quick turnaround time, especially when you've gone through extra time. He won't be able to do a lot of work this week on the training ground because it'll be Monday, Tuesday be about recovery, and then all of a sudden you're in 3 days out, 4 days out from the match. So, look, expect Dublin to win here, to win handy. It's going to do none of the two teams any favours moving forward. It'll be a tick box exercise at London, New York from last weekend. As I say, very similar to Armagh coming into this weekend. A tick box exercise. Hopefully no injuries. Hopefully no sendings off. Maybe run a few fringe players from the bench. Tick the exercise and move on.
Yeah, I just got the feeling Roisin McConville would rather be in Omagh this weekend, Kevin, than Aughrim, because I think it's not going to be pleasant, especially with these new rules. And these new rules, it could be 30 points in the difference potentially there. And before we go, Kevin, obviously news in recent days broke, and obviously very sad news for the whole GA community. The late great Mick O'Dwyer sadly went to his eternal reward. Kev, GA President Gerald Burns has extended the 70s of the association to the family of the late great Kerry hero Mick O'Dwyer, who passed away at the age of 88. Born in Waterville in 1936, the man synonymous with the moniker Micko first played for Kerry in the senior football team in 1956, would go on to have an extraordinary laden career as a player and late manager, successfully coaching the Kingdom and later Kildare, Laois, Wicklow and Clare. Initially a defender, he switched to attack with great effect and was regularly among the game's top marksmen. His success as a player would be eclipsed by the passion and energy that defined his managerial career, that made him football's most successful ever coach and a man who had an essential role in the evolution of Gaelic football. Gerald Burns said the passing of the great Mick O'Dwyer marks the loss of not just a Kerry legend, but one of the true giants and icon of Gaelic games. He was quite simply the man, and with the Midas touch, the spell he waved with that magnificent Kerry team with the 70s and 80s with a magic, and that was intoxicating for us in South Armagh, as was in his own beloved South Kerry. The sideline battle of wits that he waged with Kevin Heffernan and Eugene McGee not only defined the generation for GA fans, but they elevated Gaelic football to a whole new height and popularity. There will only be one ever Micko, and while his passing is an enormous loss to his close family and great many friends amongst the wider GA family, his memory will forever be celebrated and remembered, and he will be forever thankful that he was one of our own. Kevin McGurty, Mick O'Dwyer, legend that don't even think sums the man up.
No, arguably the most iconic figure in the history of Gaelic football, and one of the top 2 or 3 figures in the history of the GAA. I think there's a statue to Charlie Chaplin in Waterville. I wonder what we'll see Kerry County Council will do for Mickle. An absolute legend. I grew up in a household watching Kerry's golden years time after time after time. The teams that he built, the tragedies that he had, especially after what happened in 82, to come back and build that team 84, 85, 86 for the Swamp Song. a lot of new guys came in there. Obviously, very famously, you know, his relationship with his players, Spillane and Bomber being his two pets, you know, the rogue that was Paddy and him, you know, their relationship. Obviously, sadly, John Egan, the way that he left the Kerry panel, and I think that was also one of Mickle's biggest regrets. That legendary team, but they could only be legendary if they had a legendary manager, and he was that, you know. And he said he was lucky to be born in the kingdom, and look, football is religion down there, as we know, and you know the passion and the success he brought will never be forgotten of the people. And John, I suppose everybody has their Mick O'Dwyer story, and just my own too. When I heard the news during the week, I was just thinking back. You know, as a young boy, St Gall's opened a new pitch in 1988, and Kerry flew from Kerry into Aldergrove to open our pitch, because our club president at the time was from Kerry. And there's still a picture up in our club to this day of the group. Jack O'Shea, I think, was there, and you know, all these guys. Paddy was there, and Mickle was obviously with them. So you know, just shows you know the flew from one end of the country to the other end of the country to open a club pitch in Antrim. And I believe that I was too young. I was a ball boy that day, but I was too young to remember. And I believe there was a very big crowd there. But the other one, I was very lucky to spend half an hour in his company in 2007. So when I was vice president for sport at Queen's, the director of the Students' Union, Barney Hughes, that year at Queen's were hosting all of the chief executives of students' unions throughout the UK, for a conference. And the director of the Students' Union at Queen's, Barney Hughes, brought Mick O'Dwyer up from Kerry to give them a business, to give them a chat on business and how basically he became an entrepreneur himself. And I'm sitting in a room with him for about an hour. It was amazing just to listen to his own story outside of Gaelic football, but how he learned so much from business, transferring a lot of them skills into people management, obviously in football and whatever else. And then after he had finished, he asked me, could I give him directions up to the M1? So we get back on the M1 home and jumped in his car and sat chatting to him for half an hour. So look, it's a wee small things that you remember, the time you had for people, the time you had for clubs, but a legendary figure. And, you know, I would have been only 2, 3, 4 at time 84, 85, 86. But by the time I was 10, 11, I'm obsessed with Gaelic football. You know, you were always taught about the great Kerry teams, about the great Mick O'Dwyer, you know, and as I say, one of the greatest figures that ever graced the game. And hopefully we find some way in this country, and especially down in Kerry, for something to be a fitting tribute to him, because he gave so much. And them memories that people like the Taoiseach and like the GA president and like the Irish president and some of his former players, you know, shared were very humbling. And I suppose the Pat Spillane interview showed exactly what that man meant to his players, and that was a beautiful touch, I thought.
Yeah, I think we played Wicklow, I think in 2009 back door, and obviously when he was managing Wicklow, and like I think even my uncle Sean, he was doing commentary for Northern Sound at the time, and I think he was trying to get Mick for a few words after the game, and just between fans and the razzmatazz, it was just like God landed in Ockram. He was just such an iconic figure. He brought that Wicklow team to really high places, especially in that back door. It was such an enjoyable summer for them, and obviously I think the bettest down in Ockram, but everywhere he went, he was adored and loved.
Yeah, without a doubt, you know, and obviously what he done with Kildare will go down, and as amazing. Obviously, Laois, you know, 58 years I think they'd waited for Leinster Championship, for him to come in within a year, 2 years. You know, and it's a bit like what Paddy done in Westmeath then, and what Mickey Hart does everywhere he goes. You know, people just want to listen to guys like that. They want to buy into guys like that. There's a synergy between the players and the manager, and between the players and the manager and the supporters. And, you know, we obviously seen that special bond with what he had in Kerry, but then to replicate that in Kildare, to do it again in Laois, and to a lesser extent to do it in Wicklow. And that, you know, it just shows what a very special man he was, and special thinker about the game, and the passion that he had for the game.
Absolutely. Well, lovely tribute, Kevin. And obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to the O'Dwyer family this week and Furtherfield. Mick O'Dwyer, may you rest in peace. An absolute laker of the GA, and may your gentle soul rest in peace, because, my God, you left some legacy behind you. And yeah, sad times.
John, I was going to just mention something very quickly about the rules, if I may.
Yeah.
Just not to prolong this, but having watched the game yesterday and kept my powder dry, as you know, over the past few weeks about the rules, again, I'll reinforce, I think these are excellent. I think that the guys like Canavan and Ian Fitzmaurice and Jim Galvin and Morris Deegan and whoever else is involved has done a wonderful job here. They've also looked and listened, which is the most important thing, through consultation from fans, supporters, managers, etc. And they're not afraid to tweak and accept that maybe things weren't ideal first time around. So that's good. What I do think is the 35-40 yard arc, especially for the 2 points, is a wee bit too generous. I think we need to push that out a wee bit more. So the 2-pointer, a lot of guys in the modern game, they just roll off the tongue. If Conor McManus was still playing, obviously Rory Beggan, now Morgan, we look at Shane McGuigan, we look at Michael Murphy, Kieran Thompson, we can go on and on about players in Ulster alone, who can kick points, all day long from that sort of range. I think for it to be a 2-pointer, we need to make it slightly more difficult. So I think we can need that revisited. And the second one is, discipline is a big thing, but we're in danger here of becoming, and I don't know if you've ever watched a game of it, but John, if you haven't, don't ever do it, netball, where you can't touch anybody, you can't do anything. There was a number of times yesterday, especially from Derry, where they lost their discipline. And the ball was moved that 50, 60 yards up the pitch. Now, I don't think that's proportionate to what somebody has done, if you understand what I mean.
No, it's not realistic.
Yes, there should be a penalty for it. That's fine. But I think it's gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
When you're moving, like one of the incidents happened inside Donegal's 45-yard line. And I think it was the Derry guy then pushed him to the floor. Or didn't give him the ball back, and all of a sudden it was a free underneath your post. I mean, for me, it's not proportionate, and it needs to be revisited. Yes, bring the ball up 30 yards maybe, but not that far. Because look, at one stage, wasn't it in the first half, one of the Donegal boys didn't give the ball back to the Derry boy, and therefore Derry got a free underneath the post. And I was thinking, like, this is not like modern slavery, where you're whipped and told what to do. But, because you didn't hand the ball back, I understand the rationale that you want to quicken up the game, you want to punish in discipline. But as I say, I don't think it's proportionate to what the individual has done. I think it's severe punishment.
Yeah, and if that happens in, say, an All-Ireland semi-final, an All-Ireland quarter-final, or even an All-Ireland final to an extreme kind of event, Kevy, then what happens? And then you're on the back, and then everyone's blaming the new rules, and the white heat of battle in Croke Park, and the National League games, you get away with this kind of nonsense, maybe the early stages of the championship. But I just think when it's taken trust and the championship, warm summer's day in Croke Park, or in August, in July, late July, June, that's when the crack will really start.
I think I could be open to maybe somebody will come on and say it to correction, but I counted at least 3 offences against Derry yesterday would cost them 3 points. Now, as you say, look, maybe Derry's a bad example because, as I said earlier at the top of the programme, they weren't hungry enough, they didn't show enough bite. But I mean, as you say, when you get down the stretch in the cut and thrust of the championship, you want boys hanging off one another. You want that passion, you want it. And sometimes maybe, you look at somebody maybe in the past like Neil McGee or Eamon McGee, my God, you'd be whipping them off after 5 minutes, so you would, because it would cost about 15 different frees to be moved forward, like the way them boys get on, So, look, it has to be proportionate, and I think moving the ball 50, 60 yards is not proportionate.
Yeah, I think what's that saying, Kevin? In law, the punishment has to fit the crime, is it?
Yeah, but what I'm saying, it has to be proportionate.
Yeah.
And
of course,
this is disproportionate to it. It's an absolute. It's going to the ultimate punishment. Basically, you're giving away a score in front of your own goals.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying we're in danger of being netball, because in netball, basically, you're not allowed to touch anybody.
Okay.
So, as you rightly say, when we come down inside Croke Park, we want a Tyrone defender hanging off,
David Clifford.
Geaney or Clifford or whatever else, because if there aren't, there's questions going to be asked, why aren't you doing that? So there needs to be, I suppose, to use a Jared Loughlin term, there needs to be some testicular fortitude still left in the game. Some of this is not being allowing us to do that.
Someone made a very good point today. Obviously, this is kind of a good conversation. But someone did kind of make a point yesterday that, the way Derry were playing yesterday, it sounded like they didn't. Of course, they know about the new rules, but they're kind of just playing in the first half, especially just kind of the old rules, and it's nearly they didn't realize maybe at certain points the new rules are nearly in place. Like a lot of teams are nearly just kind of sticking to last year, really, aren't they? To a degree.
I didn't see it that way. As I say at the top of the program, doctors differ, patients die, and all sorts of different things. Look, if they're not playing to the new rules, you need to ask questions, because a lot of these teams have been training from November right through. I remember Jim McGuinness speaking second week of the league about getting used to the rules and running drills around them and whatever else. So, you'd be very, very, if you were a Derry supporter and they weren't doing that, you'd be asking questions why 12, 13, 14 weeks down the line, when you knew these rules were coming in, that you're not playing or adhering to that. I wouldn't agree with that. I think that all the teams now are very well set up defensively. They know exactly where they need to stand. That arc tells them as such where they need to defend from. So they will have their defensive strategies. They'll also have their transition strategies in terms of the way they attack. And they'll also have their attacking strategies as well. And I think that every team in the country, regardless if you're Waterford at the bottom of 4 or Mayo or Kerry at the top of 1, will have been working on some of them for the past 14 weeks. So, no, I wouldn't accept that at all. I do think Derry were too conservative. I think what I like about the rules is that it offers you a chance to be very expansive.
Exactly.
And if you want to go forward, yes, there is that opportunity. Derry played inside the new rules, but they played conservatively and they played lethargically, and they played, the speed was non-existent.
Paddy Tally football.
Yeah, you could say
that. Oh, Lordy Kevy. Last point on it. Robbie Brennan during the league said it's not Gaelic football, it's this, that, and the other. Meter put up huge scores. Kevy, you're watching football longer than me. It's not Gaelic football, but you're enjoying it.
It is Gaelic football. It is Gaelic football.
For the traditionalists, though, I suppose,
No, the traditionalists, remember, was Joe Kernan brought this in with Armagh in the early 2000s. The sweeper. The traditionalist was the old times when we seen the Kerry Tyrone final of 86, just going at it. And I'm not criticising Armagh here. What I'm saying is Armagh had to do that because they were probably fragile at the back. They hadn't got over the line, 98, 99, when Kerry had been beating them inside Croke Park, because maybe they didn't have that defensive structure that they needed. So, they tactically adopted. Other teams done the exact same. We've seen Tyrone do it as well. Under Mickey Hart, no better man to tell anybody how to play that sixth position than Gavin Devlin, who was excellent at, a good reader of the game. So that's when Gaelic football started to have this technical negativity. Is that the best way I can put it?
Yeah.
Well, there's this focus on defense rather than attack, how you were set up defensively, rather than how you would go forward in attack. And if we remember some of the great games of the not too distant past, when I still long for the days when Kieran McKeever marked James McCartan and Tony Scullion marked Mickey Linden, and it was a one-on-one brilliant battle. And people just went to games to see that. There was no sweeper in front of Scullion. If Scullion was exposed, Linden would take him on the outside and curl over a beauty point, and the crowd would go bananas. On the other hand, if Linden got inside him and Tony Scullion made a great block, then the crowd would go bananas that way. And that was the old traditional. It was a one-on-one. He's your mark. As Kevin Foley once said in the Meath dressing room, he's my man. I'll mark him. He's my responsibility. You look after your own. That was it. Then we obviously started having this technical change which was a negative for me. Then we had to flip out of how you beat that change when we seen obviously the introduction of the star and the big man to get over the top of the screen. So again, we had a progression in that, and now the new rules allow us to look at a game which is much more attractive. The scoreboard is turning over. You know, we just looked last weekend. Most of the games again have over 30 scores, maybe 40 scores in them, which is great. It's great for the guy or the girl paying in at the gate. So I think we're back to an old traditional GA. And I would definitely disagree with that statement that was made about it's not Gaelic football. I think we're back to the root and branch of Gaelic football. And I think it's so good because there's no such thing as a cornerback anymore. Yes, Kieran Moore and Rory, who played cornerback for Donegal at the weekend, they have their man to mark. But by the way, so's the corner forward got to mark them when they go forward. You know, there's no such thing as positions anymore. It's all out attack when you're there, and then get back as quick as you can behind the ball. You know, so it's great that way, and you know anybody can go forward. There's that freedom. You know, we're going to see later on the championship the likes of Paul Murphy, Graham O'Sullivan, Tom O'Sullivan. These sorts of guys, brilliant to watch going forward. You know, people like Owen Merchant in the game really suit him. This sort of style. You know, so it's you know, you've seen with Tyrone this year, one or two of their defenders have been getting forward, getting scores. So for that, it's so attractive, and it's back to the old catch, kick, hand pass, support, score.
100% Kevy. And Garrett McInnes obviously on the BBC social there during the week, and very honest in what he was kind of saying, and he was basically saying that like Derry kind of carried a small panel of 26 because maybe some players didn't fancy, maybe they didn't have the quality. And when you were saying about the attack and kind of defenders, obviously Garrett McInnes, he could have been doing with him, yes, absolutely, but what a loss he is to that Derry team.
Yeah, huge loss, you know, and Gareth, well, huge loss and not a huge loss because Gareth is a huge loss, but Gareth has a bit of spunk about him, which I like. And if he had been playing for Derry yesterday, I'm afraid the ball wouldn't have moved forward just 3 times. It was probably been about 7 or 8. So that's why I'm saying we've got to look at this law proportionately, because you know he's a guy that likes to tackle. He's a great drive in him, and a bit like Brendan Rodgers, he would have carried the fight yesterday to Donegal, but I dare say Gareth would have overstepped the mark once or twice yesterday, and he would have been punished accordingly.
Yeah. There's no malice in that Damien Comer tackle last year. He definitely didn't. Knee went to the head, I think, was it? Or it wasn't pretty, Mr. McGurty. I wouldn't do it to you anyway. I don't know what to get back.
You definitely get something back, and I don't want to say what it is.
But anyway, it was a very good listen, and obviously Garrett, very interesting comments with the whole Derry situation. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Derry going forward, make no doubt about it. Well, Mr. McGurty, that was absolutely fantastic as per usual. Thanks a million for joining me this week. And of course, this podcast was kindly brought to you by orgoretch.com. Use my promo Jim Podcast, get 15% off on their website. It's championship time. Get yourself organized on orgoretch.com. Mr. McGurty, thank you very much.
Cheers, John.